bit of a fish out of water here. That was just for one presentation, let alone a second longer one. So I actually am going to dig into more medically relevant simulation. This would be more for, I admit, my audience, and hopefully you'll find it entertaining. At the very least, there's going to be a lot of cool videos, but I'm going to not be insulted whatsoever if you go check your phone, go get some coffee, get a snack, and again, interrupt me at any time, because maybe we can steer this to something that's a little bit more relevant to the audience. Since I didn't know if I'd have the same audience or a different one, there's a little bit of overlap. Obviously, we already talked about the need. Hopefully, 1 million deaths over the last decade indicates a need for simulation training. The good news is in surgical robotics, this is one area where we are seeing really good adoption. This is compared to pretty much all other area of medicine. To this point, this shows the adoption curve of simulation. There's only about 3,500 robots out, and they started selling them in 2001. So the fact that when we did a lot of beta testing between 2007 and 2010, hence the spike didn't really start until after that. But very, very rapidly, we're nearing the point where everybody has access to a simulator. And referenced this a little bit earlier. One of the reasons is because for other types of simulation, you might be able to get a laparoscopic tool in a shoebox and a ham hock, and you put these tools in the box, and you have a very low-cost box simulator. This compares to simulators, especially if they have haptics involved, which may run closer to $100,000. So in the case of robotics, when the tool is a $1.8 million robot, 100,000 simulator, hey, you're getting off cheap. Yeah, it's actually much more affordable than using the real thing. If you break a $1.8 million robot during training, you may knock out revenue for a hospital for days to come, where the simulator, on the other hand, is, even though very expensive compared to maybe just a laparoscopic tool, overall it's actually pretty affordable if you look at the overall cost of robotics. So we've had tremendous adoption. It is by far the most rapidly adopted simulator for surgery ever. It's the most widely distributed simulator for surgery ever. As a matter of fact, since 2007, we've had over 4.25 million exercises performed. Just to give you an example, there's about, at this point in time, there's about 700,000 procedures done a year with the Da Vinci. Well, in 2014 alone, we had 28,500 users, 1.55 million exercise sessions. So we're getting a lot of usage of the simulator compared to the number of surgeries that take place. And now if we can just get people to train as more than just a guest and have their data recorded and used to decide whether they should get into surgery or not, that's something, of course, that we'd really like to see. So we do make a variety of simulators, and that's what I'll try to talk about today. So what you're seeing on the left-hand side, this is an emulator of the actual surgeon console. I'll show you what the actual surgeon console looks like in a second. It's built to be a desktop system, smaller, a little bit more portable. Typically, we do sell it with an ergonomic workstation, so you can raise it, lower it, and adjust it like you could the real robot. But a lot of sim labs, it's usually an afterthought. It's usually a closet, essentially. So space is a concern. But the whole goal, I think, hopefully is pretty obvious right now. We're using virtual reality to first teach you to drive the robot. This is a robot with 7 pedals. You've got buttons on your grip. You've got a touchpad that has a lot of interfaces. You can be controlling up to 3 instrument arms and 1 camera arm all at the same time. You can imagine if somebody puts you into, if you've never driven before and you had to drive a stick shift in the streets of San Francisco right from the get-go. Well, that's not how you would do it. That's not how you would drive, right? You'd go to a very simplistic parking lot, and you'd drive in circles and do very simple things, and you'd build yourself up. So the very first thing you do when teaching somebody to use a robot is, okay, let's see how to move the wrists. Okay, we know how to operate my wrist. Now let's work on camera and clutching. there's driving the camera, and then there's the clutch, where you step on the clutch, all your instruments freeze in place, and you position your hands. Let's see how scaling works and different camera angles. Let's use our different energy pedals and make sure I'm not stepping on cut when what I really wanted to do was cauterize. There's a ton of elements involved in robotics, so you don't start with the procedure, you start with basic robotic control. Then you go to basic task, and that's the kind of things that you're seeing here. After you go to basic robotic control, then you're going to go to more advanced tasks like energy management and suturing, and you slowly work your way up. Now, certainly lots of benefits if you don't have to use the real robot. Certainly there's access, there's costs. Remember, if you don't have to use the robot itself, you don't waste instruments, you don't waste OR time, you don't waste personnel time, and same thing with training content. Clinical robots, you typically can't use animals, so what you do have with the regular robot is relatively limited. And then there's the performance analysis and assessment that is really the heart of simulation, being able to objectively measure. Medicine is very subjective. You have a proctor who observes you doing the surgical case, and if they're in a bad mood, they may tell you that you're not doing it like them, but you may have just learned your technique from a different surgeon who approaches things differently. It's about as subjective as it could be, and I don't think anywhere else in a high-risk type of environment or high-risk field are we not using objective measurement. So the learning, or the assessment of somebody's learning is very important. Now, what's the whole point of this? It's really hard to argue that minimally invasive surgery versus open surgery is inferior or even anywhere close equivalent. If you have to have a giant incision in your abdomen and you have to cut through a lot of muscle, it's going to take you a long, long time to heal. So if you can access things through small keyholes, your recovery time is fast, there's less bedtime, there's less cost. So overall, it's an advantage way to do surgery. Now, if you're already a really good laparoscopic surgery and you're very good at working with these needle nose and you're fine with standing over a patient 3 to 5 hours a day and you got a good chiropractor, hey, no problem. Stick with the cheaper, more affordable laparoscopic approach. But if you can become an expert faster and you have the benefits of the ergonomics, the scaling, the visualization that come with the robot, you might be able to deliver better treatment faster if you start with a robotics approach. So that's really what we're after. We want to minimize open surgery, not say we want to use one minimally invasive approach over the other. For example, right now, 50% of hysterectomies are done open. There's no reason for this whatsoever. We're more or less slicing women open to do a procedure a certain way simply because people haven't been trained to do it a different way. And that's the way it used to be for men for prostates. And I hate to tell you this, but that's our ticking time bomb. 1 out of 3 of us will have some form of cancer or growth that is going to require treatment of our prostates. So it was really nice when that became a minimally invasive procedure only because the robot became available. Now, certainly an emulator of a $500,000 surgeon console, which is attached to this $1.8 million robot, is going to have its limitations, right? If we could make it exactly like the $500,000 console, we would, but there's cost considerations. So we do work with the company that builds the actual surgical robot to create something called a skills simulator. You detach the real robot, you attach this backpack, that takes over, it's like a virtual slave, and you're able to train using the actual surgeon console. Now, while you still have the problems of access, at least you're no longer utilizing the real slave, you're no longer using instruments, and there's some great opportunities. You're going to have to wait for a case to be set up, sometimes 15 minutes or so. So why not warm up before you do your surgery? In pretty much all sports, we warm up, and even studies have shown that you can have a 4-fold improvement in performance, and this is with experts, simply by warming up with the simulator prior to surgery. I'd take that performance improvement any day. Okay, we've talked a lot about what are the problems with doing a full 3D simulation. So this is real video of a partial nephrectomy case. The environment's very complex. So what we've done is we're trying to take a halfway step to full simulation. We're essentially taking 3D videos that are surgeon proctored. So this is one particular surgeon's approach to doing surgery. We pause the scene, we put augmented content that you can interact with within that scene, and you have to make the next clinically relevant steps. So this looks a lot cooler in real 3D. But it's relatively, this is one of our first efforts, so it's relatively simplistic interaction. But the key here is we're going beyond video. In medicine, typically they say, we're going to watch surgical videos and we're going to learn procedures of how to do procedures based on watching these videos. Well, I don't know about you, but if all you have to do is watch a video to be good at something, I'm reasonably sure I'm going to be very, very good at playing quarterback because I watch a lot of football, and I should be able to get on any team, right? Well, no, of course not. It's absurd. You have to throw the football. You have to actually do what you see and see that you've retained it. So that's really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get people to throw the ball, swing the club, make it interaction, make it interactive, test somebody at every step of the training. We also can't forget the entire team. It's not just the surgeon at the surgeon console who can screw up a surgery and endanger somebody's lives. You typically have an assist who's going to stand by the robot using laparoscopic instruments. They're going to hand in needles, they're going to apply suction, they're going to do retractions. There's actually a pretty involved relationship between the surgeon and the assist. But the way medicine is going right now, that role is going from doctors to nurses and surgical techs. They may have never met this person before they have to sit in and do a surgery. There's plenty of cases of people putting in ports where they'll hit the vena cava. Next thing you know, the surgeon gets in there and the person's bled to death. There's lots of errors that your assist could make. So this is a haptic system, very much more, believe it or not, the Da Vinci robot has very limited haptics at this point. It's the new robots that have the haptics. It only has haptics effects. You step on a camera, you feel some force between your hands to maintain a steering wheel for your camera. You feel joint limits, but there's no feedback from the robot. Well, this assist, you can see he's holding the straight object that is lifting up that piece of tissue. He's also going at all these uncomfortable angles because he's got to work around the robot. And this person off screen is knocking their instruments around all over the place. So the need for force and to be able to navigate, understanding what's a force that he can give way to because he's blocking the surgeon's instruments, it's something that hasn't been addressed. But the idea is you can work in a team environment, establish communications, but also just establish a method and approach for communicating, something that is completely lacking from surgical education right now. Simulation is not perfect, but so we need to have a bit of a transition from the virtual training to the actual robot. When we started creating our simulators, we went out and found out a lot of people were using dry labs, like you see on the middle set of images here. And we wanted to create simulation content that matched the physical tasks so that we could validate somebody training with the physical versus the virtual. Well, kind of a funny thing happened along the way. All of a sudden, people started turning our virtual tasks back into dry labs, and we realized, well, we can't get rid of the dry labs. We better just make it easy for them and give exact replicas. So what you're seeing on the right are the virtual representations of these dry labs. Not only is this used in training where you put in a lot of sim time, you get on the real robot, and then real quick, you already know the exercises, and you use the simulation time on the dry lab to verify that your skills transferred. So this way you have the confidence when you go into your first animal lab or even sometimes your first patient, at least you know all that training you did has translated. And let me tell you, you want a confident surgeon. A surgeon that's not confident is somebody who's going to get scared and they're going to make errors. A friend once told me that you have to be arrogant to cut into people. I want an arrogant surgeon, and I want them to be able to be arrogant because they have data to support it. But this is really how training standards are going. Right now, I mentioned earlier the fundamentals of laparoscopic surgery. It's dry lab tasks like this used with laparoscopic instruments. The idea is that you have both a dry lab testing environment plus a simulation testing environment. This is one standard called the the Robotics Training Network. This is used by a lot of gynecological surgeons. So it's one example of what people are using. The idea is you train on simulation because it's cheaper, but then you test with the real robot with the physical model. The testing's difficult because you have to rely on observation. And so did I really hit this little target accurately or not? Did I touch a ring to one of those wires? Am I touching there or not? That's an error. So there's a lot of limitations to actual testing on the physical. But right now, the surgical boards, this is what they know. This is what they're going to expect. So simulation is not necessarily on the testing side. It's still on the just the training side. This is what you might consider a more advanced, this is the precursor, the fundamental of robotic surgery. This is used, it's sort of this all-in-one obstacle course for robotics. And you can see we're starting again with very basic tasks for learning how to use the robot. You're using multiple tasks here. You're using endo-wrist manipulation, you're using camera, and look at these angles you're getting. Could you do that if you had a straight wrist on a laparoscopic instrument? Probably not. Here's three-arm cutting, where you're switching back and forth between your arms. They're trying to all-in-one physical model give you all the tasks. It's not teaching you anything procedure-related, just making sure you know how to drive the car. That's really it. But that's a first step. We already mentioned this idea of low-cost simulators. One of the big challenges is, while $100,000 may be really cheap compared to a $1.8 million robot, if they don't buy a simulator with their robot, coming up with $100,000 isn't so easy. So how can we get simulation into more people's hands? I do believe there's a role for low-cost simulation, not only getting it into the public's view, but if you can get a low-cost portable simulator into the hands of a resident or a fellow or even a high school student, if we can get that training exposure as far upstream as possible and start collecting those data on those users, by the time they get to their application for their residency or fellowship, it may not be the same thing as the actual robot, but imagine the resume you could build simply from simulation training all the way to the point of entering medicine for real and using robots. We've seen this in flight simulation. There's some people that have used flight simulation where that skill directly translates into controlling drones. We can do this for medicine also. So we talked about being able to collect data on users. One of the things that's very important for any simulator to prove that it's not just a video game is validation. I won't really go into all the different types of validation, but I will point out some of the more important ones. First of all, I think construct validity is extremely important. If your simulator can't tell who's an expert, matter of fact, they should be able to tell even intermediates and experts and even super experts from novices. If it can't do this, you have a video game. If your simulator does not compare and provide training equivalent to what the gold standard is, in robotics it's pig labs. Well, certainly for using the robot, we easily have this. If anything, we can surpass the pig lab, although it's really hard to say if there is a gold standard for robotics because it's really only 15 years old. But more importantly, predictive validity. We need to show that simulation translates into OR experience, and I've got at least one study I want to talk about that. I don't know of any simulator that's been more validated. We felt it's very important, so we really do partner with institutions to be sure that what we're building translates into actual surgical skills. So this is an example of what simulation could do. This was Morristown Memorial Hospital, where they had 5 GYN surgeons who wanted to use simulation to privilege their surgeons. Remember, if you don't have every hospital is in charge of their own privileging. There's no national standards or tests required whatsoever. Typically, people will go to a 2-day class put on by the industry, and the industry's job is to get you using robots as fast as possible to use instruments. There's a little bit of a conflict of interest there if anyone relies too much on them for training. You need to have your own standards put in place, and that's what this hospital was trying to do. So they took 5 of their expert surgeons. At the time, there were only 28 simulation exercises available. Now there's well over 60. And they each are doing at least 75 cases per year. This is actually quite a bit for a GYN. And they looked at all the exercises, they picked 10 of them, and then they each tested themselves. They took each of the exercises, did it 5 times, and took their best score from each, and they cherry-picked those to get their best result, and then they averaged their scores together to create an average. So meeting an average means you're reaching a level of proficiency. But in reality, because these guys each had multiple times, asking their trainees to take each of these 10 exercises and beat their averages just once takes a tremendous amount of time. So they took 14 study surgeons. These are surgeons that had not used the robot before. They might have laparoscopic or open surgery skill. Their average board certification time was 17.5 years. So these were not young punks just trying to get into medicine. These are very experienced surgeons. And they spent a very significant amount of time just passing these exercises one time each. This is 10 exercises where each exercise takes maybe 2 minutes. The average time was 20 hours, and there was a huge range from 9 to almost 40 hours. Now, in medicine, they don't talk about, can you reach this level of proficiency? They say, do so many cases or put this many hours in. It's always time-based. So you have some users who are not getting enough time in training, and others who could have moved on to bigger and better things and not waste valuable time in training when they already have the skills. So using a simulator to actually establish proficiency can save time. It's the most efficient way to train people. Then they were allowed to do their very first case independent. They did have a dual surgeon console set up, so you had a second console there for somebody to take over if need be. But essentially, these surgeons were allowed to do their very first case all at once. They were compared to a control group, which was surgeons that had hospital privileges that were using the robot. They hadn't done simulation, but they weren't averaging more than 2 cases per month. Not a lot of sim time, or not a lot of surgery time. And the results were, they found out that the study surgeons, right on their very, very first case, matched the experts that set the standard in terms of time, blood loss, and even on blind video review, they came very close to matching up. Here's the scary part. The surgeons that had the privileges that were doing their surgeries only 2 times a month, they took 50% longer, they had significantly more blood loss, and when it came to the blind video review, they were unanimously ruled as the worst of the surgeons participating in the study. So here you got people doing surgery all the time that aren't maintaining their skills. They had no standards for getting into surgery in the first place, and it's certainly argued that they were doing very inefficient surgery. Why not use simulation to skip that learning curve altogether? Because it can be done. I'm going to skip a little bit of this. This would be if we were looking at all the research. What are your take-homes for using simulation to create a training protocol? Certainly all exercises are different. Some of them take very long to pass. Some of them are very quick and easy. Putting jacks in a bowl is pretty easy compared to doing a tubular anastomosis. Not all metrics apply to everything. Every exercise has certain metrics that are going to be applicable. You have to be very conscious of this. Trainees work at very different rates. You might want to test somebody for innate ability before you allow them into your residency and fellowship. It costs well over $1 million to train every surgeon. So if you're going to make that kind of investment, maybe you should test that they have the aptitude. Not everybody's cut out for surgery. Not everybody's cut out for robotic surgery. You may not have the time. They talk about the 80-hour work week sounds long, but that's the most you can make a resident or fellow work nowadays. But they still complain that they have nowhere close to enough time to teach everybody everything within 80 hours. Certainly, simulation can be used for privileging. It's available for surgeon warm-up. And whether you use the real robot or the emulator of the robot, the evaluation, the assessment shows that there's almost no difference. Talk to the surgeons, they want to drive their Ferrari. They want the actual surgeon console, right? But when you sit and look at the data, this is why you don't just take subjective opinions. You have to look at the data. The performance is almost equivalent, whether it's an emulator of the robot or the real thing. Do you want to spend $100,000 on training, or do you want to spend $600,000? It's robot console plus simulator. So our goal is to insert simulation and evaluation of data almost into every step of surgery, and it's pretty much, we have products that everywhere in green is a hardware product. We also have a subsidiary called Mimic Med where we do more training than anybody other than the robot vendor themselves. So the blue are kind of areas where we're doing simulation. Well, I would sure love to get into these areas where we have no green or blue. I'd love to be able to measure inside the OR. One of the projects we're working on right now is we're using crowdsourcing to evaluate surgical videos. It turns out that a crowdsourced review of a video is almost nearly equivalent for experts, intermediates, and novice surgeons as compared to paying for an expert to review your video. So, and let me tell you, if you ask an expert to review your video, you're lucky if you get it back in a month. And they skip through tons and tons of content. However, if you crowdsource, they're very diligent. It can be done cheaply. You can get results back the same day. It's an amazing way to evaluate somebody in the OR. Until we have very intricate systems to measure complex tasks, so this could be applying neural networks, fuzzy logic, machine learning, to taking the inputs from surgery and turning that into data that you can use for assessing somebody's performance, we can rely on things like crowdsourcing. And we need to take that information, cycle it back into a simulation training curriculum that helps address somebody's weaknesses. So again, we can accelerate the learning curve as opposed to just being a component that's there right before somebody does their first surgery. So this is just an idea of some of the things you learn. You can learn the procedure, identify tissue, drive the robot, set up the robot, train the team. Then you have assessment performance. The first three columns are using an actual Da Vinci to train. The third column is using a skills simulator attached to the Da Vinci. This company is not licensed everything that we have, so they can't do everything quite yet. But the whole idea is let's try to create a virtual wet lab without the cost of the animals, without the cost of the OR, without the cost of using the actual robot. So when you're creating a training program, what does good look like? I once got in trouble. I did an interview with Bloomberg and was talking about the different institutions and how all hospitals do things on their own. There's no holding them accountable. There's no transparency. So I said it was training was like being in the wild, wild west. You didn't know what you're going to get. Let me tell you, I got a call from the CEO of Intuitive the very next day. They didn't like the idea that we were letting people know that training was so unstandardized as it really is. But this is what can, if you do this you're going to have a good training program. First of all, you can't just let people train and not record it. You need to identify them and you need to record the results. People that use the simulator on the robot console, 98% of those log in as guests, so they're not tracked. If you log in as guests, how do you know if you're getting better over time? How do you know if your users are any good? Proficiency levels, you have to agree to this by the robotics committee. Every hospital is actually like an island. Surgeons all train to the level of their top surgeon, and they can be very, very different from hospital to hospital. So just because a standard applies to one hospital doesn't mean it applies to you. When people use a curriculum, you get twice the utilization. With 60-some exercises, it's crazy to just say, okay, just go learn everything. There's like rolling a cadaver out and saying, go learn stuff. You wouldn't do that, right? You have to have very specific ideas. Is this a new user? Is this a urology or gynecology or maybe a cardiovascular thoracic surgeon? Is it retaining skills or is it surgical warm-up? Very different. Curriculum's important. You need to have it and you make sure people adhere to it. You got to be able to access your platforms. You got to be able to train together, and you need to review the training data regularly and correlate these with outcomes. This is the only way you have a program that's going to be successful. And in the age of risk management and costs, it's crucial. One death can essentially take down an entire program. In Korea, there was an actress that died while under Da Vinci surgery. Not another Da Vinci was purchased there for the next 5 years. So what's the cost of allowing that risk when you can measure it and address it? So we do lots of training. I invite any of you who want to see some of the training we do. This is one of the robotic schools we work with. It's in Nancy. This is one of the only universities that actually offers a degree associated with robotics training. It's a 2-week course, very involved. The robot manufacturer actually hates this course because that's 2 weeks away from surgery. It's too long, hence this conflict between training and the goals of a robot manufacturer, which is to sell. We also have our headquarters located at the Nicholson Center at Florida Hospital. More training happens there than anywhere else in the world. We're working with a lot of places around the world. We're looking to establish a training center in Tianjin, just outside of Beijing. That should be very interesting for a population that's going to really depend on robotics very, very soon. We're just hoping to network these training centers, use lots of telepresence for case observation as opposed to being in the OR. Any time you guys are near one of these training centers and want to try out the simulators, please, I invite you to come check them out. So that's about it. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
One question on the actual robot and how to control it.
Sure.
I'm imagining there are some kind of software, a robot controller software running.
Yeah, an API, correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And is that the same controller that you use in the simulator, or is it an API?
That's a great question. It is. It's very, very similar. The API is almost exact. We control the virtual robot like we do an actual robot. But here's the thing that's kind of interesting about a robot. They actually don't know where they are in space. Their errors are huge. We've run our simulator right next to their robot, and the errors, you can be off by 3-4 centimeters. But it doesn't matter, because if you're a surgeon and you're controlling it and you see the output of your results, you self-correct. So it doesn't matter if you're completely controlling everything visually, you're not trying to do an automated task. So you can have this gross error in controlling your robot and still be very effective in surgery.
Yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah.
When it comes to maybe automate these kind of procedures. I mean, it's
Yeah.
something in the automotive industry,
Right.
because everything is measured. You know exactly
Right.
where your robot is. You know exactly where your human or workpiece
Right.
is in a surgical environment. I mean, the robot could be here, the human could be here.
Yeah.
Different sizes. I mean,
And then what about your environment?
Yeah.
Right? Your environment can be everywhere. We talked about the complexity of trying to model that ahead of time, right? And what are going to be the reactions if can you predict your reaction forces, your deformation, your stress strain based on a model, even if you did know where your robot is. But I mean, there is hope. There's energy delivery robots that are automated. There's robots for carving out bone to insert prosthetics. Those are much more well-known environments. So I think there's possibilities, and I'd like to see us do very simple tasks. Like, let's take suturing. It's something that people very much struggle with. That's what the robot's there for, suturing. So if I could just touch one side of the wound, I could touch the other, and then move into a needle driving form where all I do is push and rotate to decide bite size. We could do a automated approach to facilitate very complex tasks that people might not understand. And I'll bet we can get people up the learning curve even faster if we incorporate some of that. Yes.
So I don't work in this area, but I'd like to know, are there many manufacturers for these surgery robots?
Right now, for a soft tissue robot that does laparoscopic type surgery, there's one big monopoly, and they act like it. But all the other big medical device manufacturers are all getting into the game. We'll see our first new one released next year. A number of new ones coming out 3 years from now. In 5 years, you're going to have a robot that could be procedure specific. You can decide, do you want to work in the surgical field or do you want to sit at a console? Are you going to have something that's low cost or high cost? Pretty much anything you want is about ready to be available. I predict in 10 years, we're going to look back and say, boy, I can't believe I actually held a tool with my hand and touched a patient, or actually put my fingers inside a patient. I think that is going to go away because a lot of the patents are ending on the original robot. People have seen the success of Intuitive Surgical. It's been a Wall Street darling, to be honest. Wish they'd paid more attention to than just their stockholders, but that it has shown a success. So when we have competition, I mean, it's going to be amazing. And I think we're going to see semi-automation first. We're going to see more automation as we go. A lot of the companies we're working with are very interested in patient-specific modeling, and they're very interested in automated tasks. So in 5 years from now, I'd probably have a great talk on automation. But right now, it's kind of too early. Thanks.